going on, folks? Happy Saturday, the 29th of November, 2025. That's right. We are now in the last 2 days of November. And that means we're not just coming up on December, we're coming up on the last month of the first half of the decade. Whoa, that's right. The 2020s are nearly halfway done. Another month from now. And I think this is a fine time to look back and see what has happened with, for example, Bitcoin in the last 5 years. Where has it come from? Where has it gone to? And what are the future prospects of the next 5 years? Will it be around in 5 years? Do you think it will go up, down, or sideways in value to people in the next 5 years? Do you think it will continue its remarkable progress that it's made since being launched 16 years ago in 2009? And yeah, what is the rosy or stormy outlook, if you will? Not in a price point. I don't care about the price. The returns are more interesting, but I'm talking about the value, right, which is to me more than the money of the coin, because what Bitcoin can do, I've always said, is far more than just transfer money, right? I know that's what most people think of it as, but it's a lot more than that. So whatever you might think about Bitcoin, it turns out that when the truth is found to be lies, and you cut away all the insanity of the clown show, which surrounds assets like Bitcoin and other leading cryptocurrencies, you very quickly discover something about those other cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. And I'm not talking about like your favorite meme coin that ranks down somewhere in the like 30 to 40, or whatever, the 10 to 15 millionth range out of the 26 million or however many cryptos there are now. Talking about the leading coins that actually have liquidity and that have a use case that can do something useful beyond be just money. Although being money is a perfectly fine thing. Like, that is very valuable. People should not forget that. If you are creating a limited supply of an asset that people use in a monetary way, and it has all the requirements to be a good decentralized cryptocurrency, that is actually a very useful thing. But there are assets like Bitcoin which can do more than just be money, right? I've said this many, many times, right? And pointed this out in lots of different ways, right? We are dealing with an asset that has characteristics of being much more than just money, right? Like, it has the capacity to be used as a tool against censorship. It has the capacity to be used as a tool that can let you transport it very easily, transmit it very easily, right? Sending or receiving it is divisible, is scalable, is globally capable. In fact, it's capable beyond just the Earth. Doesn't even require electricity technically. You can run Bitcoin with paper and pencil. Yes, it would be complicated. Yes, it would cause issues in terms of lag and all that stuff. But you can certainly have cryptocurrencies based on the Bitcoin protocol, if not, as well as Bitcoin itself, without actually having electricity. I know it sounds convoluted, but where there's a will, there's a way, and there's certainly a capacity to have something like that that is entirely math-based and can do incredible things even in a society that has no electricity. Which I know, again, sounds like, what are you talking about? Go look up. In fact, I posted on a number of places over the years. Go look up, using Bitcoin without the internet. You'll see it can be done with paper and pencil. Is it convoluted? Yes. Do you have a chance in hell of actually getting anything mined if you don't use electricity? Very, very, very slim chance, right? The answer is probably not. But if the entire world doesn't have electricity, then yes, your chances go up dramatically because the difficulty rate would be decreased so that it could be done by people by hand, right? Until electric devices are available again. And you might think to yourself, well, what kind of world are you talking about where there's no electricity? Well, imagine, if you will, a significant electromagnetic pulse blasting out of the sun. You might think that's crazy, but actually it happens all the time. The question is, when will the next one happen that will massively disrupt all of the things on the earth? Now, maybe it won't happen in our lifetime. Maybe it won't happen for centuries. Maybe it won't happen for eons. But it could. So I'm just putting that out there to remind you that Bitcoin has powerful uses beyond being just money. And in theory, there are also other ways to solve the money issue of Bitcoin if there were no electricity. For example, it might be that the community would decide to increase the bits, rather the blocks reward for a period of time in order to enable more. It wouldn't have to be, but in order to enable basically the remainder of the 21 million to be produced, and then have other ways that we currently don't use but could, like the old way of doing it when people would, kind of as a novelty, make these coins, these physical coins. This is worth a Bitcoin, and there'd be like a Bitcoin on a, with some information written or printed on the actual coin or minted on the actual coin that would be like, information you'd need in order to use it. And you could do things like that with either paper notes or other kind of, Anyway, the point is, you get my point. Now, the point is, we don't need, right, electricity. But okay, assuming we still have electricity for the next 10, 20, 50, 100, 300 years, and we get around any issues caused by electromagnetic pulses from the sun, then what is the prospect of this asset even surviving the next 5 years? Right? Where was it 5 years ago? Hello there. Hello there. MITI. Your craziest yet believable. What's a crazy conspiracy theory? I haven't told you any conspiracy theories. There are electromagnetic pulses that come out of the sun. These are observable things. We see when they happen. They do affect the planet, by the way, sometimes. Just not on a global scale. It hasn't happened on a global scale, but it could. Right? But that said, anyway, like I said, assuming we do have electricity, and I'm going with that assumption for the time being because we have electricity, and also we have ways to combat the negative effects of an EMP. For example, we have lots of spare equipment to keep national infrastructure assets running. Right? We just have to rip them out of the cold storage facilities that they're in and plug them in and start running things again. But not everything has a backup, right? So a lot of things wouldn't have that and it would take time to replace them. But again, assuming we have all of the things we need. Do you have solar panels? Yes, I do have solar panels. Here in Israel, pretty much everyone has some solar electricity, which we use to heat up the water in our homes, for example. It is a very common practice here. It's been done here for decades and decades. It's very normal in Israel. It's really, really normal. Yeah. It doesn't mean we all generate electricity enough to power our own houses entirely, but it does reduce the overall cost and the overall amount of electricity that we're using from the grid, which is necessary in a country that is very small and has lots of sun. So we may as well use that asset, that resource. And we don't have the greatest relations in the world with countries that supply us with oil. We very often we have to buy our oil from third parties, and that means that we have to adapt and improvise a little bit in order to reduce the amount of oil that we use. So things like solar panels and wind generators have long played a not insignificant portion. Right? There are even Israel is a place where there have been multiple low wind or low speed wind mills created. They're basically like these little fans that are powered by very low speed winds, and they're enough to power, if you have enough of them on your roof, you could power your house with them, or you could power, some power tools or some white appliances or whatever you need with just like one or two of them. You could power basically most of the things you need in a typical home. There are inventions like that have been made in Israel, and like a long time ago. These are not new things. Yeah, these things that have existed for decades here now, and we're going to keep seeing innovations like that coming out of Israel because it's necessary. We've also seen. Anyway, I don't want to get into the whole clean energy thing right now, although it's a fascinating topic. Thank you for asking. Isn't Israeli that you think is a war with neighbors? What? Awesome. I live in the Appalachian Mountains here. Yes, I am Israeli. I'm also American. I love the Appalachians. I used to live not far from there. I mean, not super close, but I lived in Pennsylvania. So, okay. I really don't want to talk about the war in this particular video. If you want to see my thoughts about the war, I have plenty of live streams that I've done about that. This particular video was talking about the current status of Bitcoin and the future value that it portends to bring. Right, where it's been over the past 16, 17 years is that it has had a rapid rise in financial value because of a lot of prospecting about the future increased perceived value beyond just its monetary value. Right, so we've seen people invest in Bitcoin, sure, to make gains, to make money. Obviously, that's the big obvious one. But the real kicker, why a lot of people are putting a lot of money into it, is because they see that the future of financial transactions is in cryptocurrency. Now, I get why I get why there's a lot of skepticism around that. Believe me, I do. I understand central databases are faster and all this other stuff. But if you understand this field, beyond just the headlines, right, then you get that what we're talking about is not just wow, I'm getting crazy sneezes right now. What we're talking about in the crypto space is not just simple monetary arguments. There are actual values in being able to store information and retrieve it on a decentralized system that basically can't really be hacked. It's incredibly difficult to hack the network system than Bitcoin network. Yeah, it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's very difficult because currently there really isn't enough computer power available to do it. And even if somehow you were to convince most of the world's nodes to do a 51% attack, or you were to get control of 51% or more of the world's nodes somehow to do an attack, the people that run the nodes would immediately switch because there already are plans in place for this situation, right? There are contingency plans for lots of different things. They would switch to a different algorithm, basically converting Bitcoin to a different, a new network, essentially. And your hacked version would be worthless because people would stop using it. Everybody would move to the actual one, the new one, the one that's established to move away from the problem one. And that's if they didn't implement other contingency plans that do exist to either roll back your hacking or, more importantly, to effectively out-hack you and take control back of your hack system. And they could do that very quickly, possibly even in real time as you're hacking it, right? If you were to hack it, right? On top of that, if there were a situation like, I don't know, the Bitcoin network were to be attacked by a quantum system, well, there are other algorithms in place to combat that very problem. Please, what was you right here? Show me the material in your hood. What do you mean the material? Put your hood inside out over what? Okay, I don't understand. What do you mean the material inside my hood? You mean inside the hood that I'm wearing? Like the hoodie? It's just, I don't know, fuzzy material. Fuzzy material. You see that? Fuzzy black material. I don't know what you call it. It's not cotton. It's not wool. It feels synthetic, but it feels like a synthetic material that's meant to feel natural, if that makes sense. A fuzzy hoodie. So Bitcoin and its value, right, are, like I said, far more than the monetary aspect. We have not just the ability to send and receive money, but the ability to send and receive other information and to retrieve it at will and to see a record of it forever, as long as the Bitcoin exists in the network. That is very meaningful because that ensures that we have basically permanent data storage that is unalterable. And if you say, well, how can you know it's unalterable? Well, again, we are dealing with very advanced computer algorithms, right? And you can say, well, SHA-256 is old. It's not so advanced. It's still more advanced than most people know how to deal with, right? Yes, in computer programming language terms, it's not new. But guess what? Algorithms, specifically cryptographic algorithms, are meant to break. Eventually, they are designed to fail. That means that we are aware, right, that the algorithm will actually break at some point. Therefore, we have contingencies in place. Now, you might say, well, how are you so sure that they have these contingencies? Well, because if you know anything about the Intel core developer teams that exist out there, and the Bitcoin core developers that exist out there, you will be aware that they have these things. You can look this up. This is not secret information. There are contingency plans. There are other algorithms that are quantum resistant, for example. There are other solutions in place to ensure the survivability of this asset, which many developers are heavily invested into, like the people who run the Bitcoin core development groups, right? They're not in this to lose all of their time and money, right? Especially if they've been in it a long time. They definitely want to maintain their invested value. They're not going to do that if they just allow everyone to come in and destroy the network willy-nilly with some garbage information, right? If you can just come in and basically break the algo, that's not very good for the amount of money they've invested in Bitcoin. Right? They want to make sure that the time they spent building Bitcoin is not all wasted. Well, how do they do that? Well, like I just said, contingency plans, right? Build redundancy into the system, build backups that you can use in case of immediate necessity, monitor certain transactions, do all kinds of different things that basically keep the system safe and running normally. That is exactly what people have done. That is exactly what you can expect the developers to keep doing, right? That is precisely how Bitcoin is maintained. Without getting into too many of the specifics, like I said, you can go and learn all about this stuff. It's literally open source, right? And you can be one of the core developers if you put your mind to it and contribute to the community and all that. Like, it's not a closed system. That's the power of the fact that it's open source and decentralized, right? That is literally part of that power, right? That's why it is so powerful. Right? It's not an accident that it is as powerful as it is. It is by design. Satoshi was really a brilliant developer who made a very incredible protocol that really does have global capacity. And one of the reasons is precisely because of its self-correcting nature, right? The ability for it to be corrected by the users, the ability of it to be adapted to change as necessary by the people who were using it, by the developers of it, right? And anyone can, again, become a developer of it. And the developer community requires consensus for significant or for changes, right? Therefore, you can't just go in and be like, oh, I'm going to be a developer and change it. Give me 10 million Bitcoins. No, you can't do that. You might think you can, and you might be like, whoa, there was a loophole before. Yeah, there's been a few loopholes over the years, and they were quickly found and closed. And there was once even a significant one, even twice, you could say, significant ones, even 3 or 4 times. But they all were quickly resolved, and the network did not suffer. The network got stronger as a result, right, of finding those loopholes. Now, does that mean there are no more loopholes? Listen, that's the thing with developers. They're constantly finding things, right? They're constantly finding new ways to improve things and new ways to break things and new ways to fix things. That is what software engineers and software programmers and people like that do for a living. So of course there can be more issues found, but that's one of the things about Bitcoin is it doesn't constantly make a million updates, which means it doesn't constantly have a million bugs to fix. And that is one of the problems with software that is constantly updating. Whenever you have software that's like always updating, always giving you new features, always saying, oh, this bug was fixed, all of that, what they're telling you is they couldn't make the software right the first time, the second time, or the 10,000th time. Because if the software was right the first time or the second time, they wouldn't need a third time of updates, at least not for a long time. And the only time they would actually update anything is when they actually have significant updates for you, like major feature changes, right? Major functionality changes. But that's not what you have in a lot of these other projects, whether they be in crypto or not. What we have are softwares that are written usually by people who don't really know what they're doing, who are borrowing library classes from one of the other big libraries, and then just copy pasting, editing, making mistakes, or even if they're writing new code, it's filled with bugs. And then they have to spend the next 10,000 iterations fixing it until they get it right. And by then, nobody wants to use it anymore because it's just always buggy. right? And too many programmers don't comprehend this. They just make crap, throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And that is not a way to build a successful piece of software. But Bitcoin basically was built to do what it does, and that's it. Now, can it do more? Yes. For example, functionalities such as NFTs, or ordinals as they're called, and runes have been added to Bitcoin over the years, and SegWit, right, segregated witness for transactions. These things have been added to Bitcoin over the years, but that doesn't mean that they are added willy-nilly to the network. No, they took a long time to be added, and they can be easily undone by without being implemented if there's no consensus. In the case of ordinals and runes, those were added to the protocol. Essentially, they were added on top of the protocol without having to change the algorithms or the protocol itself, right? They're built within the framework of the protocol. So they work perfectly fine in that sense, right? Without having to make any major changes. So that's one of the very reasons that those type of features have been able to be added without worrying about breaking how the system works. I got some kind of allergic sniffles out here. It's crazy. November. Normally I get these in the springtime, but there are some trees around here that are pollinating now because this is Israel, so we have multiple seasons per year of like flowering, etc. And that's how it goes. It seems that some of the trees around here are doing what trees can do to me. It's kind of funny. Certain trees. Anyway. So that is basically what's happening with Bitcoin and why it is effectively in the state that it's in terms of functionality, right, and survivability. Now, is it likely to survive in the next 5-10 years? Well, if you know the rule, for every one day that your project survives, it is likely to survive another day. So if you've been around for 4 years, you're likely to be around for another 4 years. If you've been around for 16 years, 17 years, practically, well, you're likely to be around for another 16 or 17 years, right? Now, that's not always the case. Obviously, eventually, things do end. I mean, eventually, things end. So it's kind of inevitable. At some point, people will stop using it. But in the meantime, all right, the longer the thing is around, especially if it's not an animate object. Oh, hello. 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 Oh, my God, you're so cute. Oh, my God, you're adorable. Shalom. You're so adorable. איך קוראים לו or what? Bell. Bell? יפיופה. יפיופה. שיהיה לכם שבת שלום. תודה. So, that was an adorable little dog. Little rugrat, crumb snatcher kind of dog. Very, very cute. So, the reality, is that there is a very high propensity of technologies that survive a year or two to survive another year or two, and technologies that survive 10 years to survive another 10 years. We see that happening all the time in many different fields with many different technologies, not just computer stuff. So, can we envision Bitcoin surviving the next 5 years? Well, I'll tell you what, at this point, having survived 16, almost 17 years, it is far more probable that it will survive another 5 years than not. And those are just the law of large numbers. Right? It is far more likely to survive than not. Now, does that mean it's a guaranteed survival? No, nothing is guaranteed. In life, nothing is guaranteed. But at least not really. I mean, yes, things can be guaranteed to a degree, but you can't guarantee the survivability of a thing over a long period of time, because there's always unknown unknowns, right? There are always probabilities that something will go wrong. So, yes, while Bitcoin is likely to survive, that means we are going to be seeing, probably, for now, because remember, it is still only 16 or 17 years old, we're going to see for now an increase in the amount of investment into the network, which means we're going to see an increase in the amount of development in the network. Development like use case, right? Using the existing use case functionalities, people will come up with different things to use it for. For example, order your pay-per-view with Bitcoin, order your monthly subscription to whatever social thing you use with, that you pay for a premium. Like maybe you pay for Grok or OpenAI, or you bought your car with, Bitcoin, or maybe you buy your groceries with it. And it doesn't have to be necessarily Bitcoin. I'm just saying as an example, right? And the more that it is used on specifically Bitcoin, the more it increases the strength of the network. But even if it's using other forms of crypto that interact with Bitcoin, that's also good for Bitcoin and those other cryptos and the general crypto ecosystem, right? The more that there's activity in the ecosystem, the better. Now, some people will say, yeah, but with 26 million cryptos, think about how much more powerful Bitcoin would be if all the focus is put in just Bitcoin. Well, yes and no. That's true. It would probably have maybe a little bit more value. Maybe even a lot more value. Maybe significantly more value, right? We could be at $1 million Bitcoin already. It's possible, but we don't know that for sure. What we do know is that the more that there is competition in the space, the more that benefits the overall space, because competition breeds excellence. Competition brings about innovation. Competition brings about, new benchmarks and records and all these other kind of things that are highly sought after in the world of developing new things for products and services, right? That's how we advance, right? We advance literally by having more competition rather than less. If we have less competition, then we have a problem, right? Or we have a potential problem, because if we have less competition, then there's nothing to challenge our assumed, established, institutionalized ways. And that's exactly when you go idle and you get destroyed by a competitor. Right? And that's exactly why, if you want to innovate something and make it go global, like you're innovating an entirely new sphere of technology, like Satoshi did when he created Bitcoin, then you ideally want competition, right? And you want a lot of it, as much as possible. But again, there is the argument to be made, we don't need 26 million of them. Well, that's okay. In every gold rush of any kind, of any asset, there will always be the initial over-exuberant phase of people rushing in to get as much land grab as they can, only to fizzle out, or if they're lucky, to sell out to a larger competitor. And that happens over and over again until the consolidation period ends. And that can take anywhere from months to years to decades, depending on the nature of the field that is being competed over. This is a really cool, let me show you this. There's a software turn. I love this. I love these kind of trees with these kind of roots all over them. It's a ficus tree. I mean, nothing unusual, but they have these crazy roots, and these roots will actually rip up roads very easily. That's why they have to be constantly pruned back. Right? And these kind of trees, they can easily tear down roads. Easily. They rip them up like nothing. Like literally nothing. So, but yeah, that's why you have to constantly deal with the insane roots of these trees. You know, they are fun to, you know, if you're a kid running around in these things, playground type stuff, it's quite enjoyable. That's for sure. You know, hang on. Does the software turn into hardware when you? Okay. Hello from Indonesia. Hello, Indonesia. Okay. Could you show it to us? You sit down or stand up? Okay. Are you now? Have you ever? Okay. You guys really like the silly comments today, huh? That's all right. What's up, bro? Hey, how you doing? You like and subscribe? I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, well, like and subscribe anyway, would you? I appreciate it. Here. What do you want to see? You want to see me put my hood over my head? There you go. How's that? Ooh, do I get a like and subscribe? There you go. No, not enough. Oh well. But I do appreciate the support. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much for getting me over to the next goal on the subs and all that. Appreciate it. And just, again, thanks to that kind of loving support that I continue to make these videos. Not by way of monies, yes, because I don't get paid for these videos. Just by way of, I see you guys are interested, so I keep on bringing on new topics and discussions and things. So many messages held for review. Toshiba, these Microsoft. Okay. Do I drink gravy? What kind of question is that? I hope I'm not being rude. Okay. Okay, well, you are a bit, but whatever. You might leave the Earth. Okay, well, if you're going to outer space, be careful. Don't get eaten by space aliens. How's that for a pro tip? So Bitcoin and its survivability looks pretty good for the next 5 to 10, even 15, 20 years. Certainly up to 15 years. Looks pretty good. Which means we're looking at around, we're now ending 2025, we're looking at around a forecast of at least 2040. You know, until we don't know yet, is there going to be a cliff? Right? Maybe something will happen within the next 15 years that we'll see the end of Bitcoin within 15 years from now. Could happen. But for the next 15 years, it looks pretty set to survive. And that means that we will get to the point where we have mined more than 99% of all the Bitcoin. And then that last 1% will be mined over the next basically 100 years or so. Which is kind of crazy to think about it. Like, wait a minute. You're saying Bitcoin was mined, 99% of it was mined in the first 32 years or so, and then it took another 100 years to mine the last 1%? And the answer is yes. And if you ask why, it's all about the block rewards and the halvings, etc., right? That is why, right? It was mathematically devised to do that, which will make things like investing in being a node worthwhile. Right now, you can get a node for fairly cheap, and you can start earning tiny little amounts of Satoshis relatively every time you process transactions. Not only that, when you process transactions, if you run a node, you can actually process your own transactions higher up in the queue than if you were to just rely on someone else to process them for you, right? And that's good because it saves you time and it saves you money, right? So on top of the fact that you can actually process transactions in the queue faster, you can also save yourself some money, which people do like. And that is a good reason to be a node runner. And even more than that, when you process node transactions, you will also have the benefit of earning higher amounts of Satoshis in the future, or higher valued amounts of Satoshis. You might actually earn less Satoshis, but it might have a higher financial value. All right, less Satoshis because of the way the halvings work and the way the transactions work, etc. But in general, the value of those transactions will continue to rise as long as the Bitcoin network remains alive and continues to rise over time in its perceived value. Which means if you are a node runner already and you're, processing transactions for people, you are well set to be a successful node runner in the years and decades to come, which means you could set up basically your own version of MasterCard, but running on Bitcoin, right, and process transactions for people without them even knowing that you're the one processing their transactions. And they could literally be paying you hand over fist in microtransactions every single day. And by the time Bitcoin raises to theoretically something even like $1 million a coin or whatever, possibly more in the future, that means that you could be processing transactions for a relatively high value asset, which has already seen, by the way, its returns raise from 0 to over 22 billion% or something crazy at the all-time high that we had not long ago when it was at like $126,000. Now imagine what those returns will be when it reaches $500,000, when it reaches $1 million, when it reaches maybe 10 million or 100 million or $1 billion. And before you say Bitcoin can never reach $1 billion, I will say to you, you do not know that, because you cannot forecast what the value, for example, of the dollar will be by the time it would ever approach such numbers. What you can know is that if the dollar continues to be printed ad infinitum with the current policy of just printing all the time, even with quantitative tightening every once in a while, etc., right? They still keep printing more. And if the Bitcoin network continues to be as it is, and the dollar continues to be as it is, well, it could very well be that a Bitcoin is worth $1 billion in another 30 years, 40 years. Which means if you're young enough, or if you've got kids or grandkids, and you're invested in Bitcoin and you have a decent little stack to leave them, you might be leaving them literally billions of dollars worth of money with even a couple of Bitcoins. Which, again, I know sounds crazy. And we're talking about far in the future. There's no way to predict it, like 100% accuracy, of course. But if you just look at the statistics, the cold, hard data that we have to go on, you'll see it's not so crazy sounding. In fact, it is the logical estimation to make. at least in my opinion, my analysis of the data. Why does my analysis matter more than yours? It doesn't necessarily. It doesn't. I mean, I have been involved in Bitcoin for a very long time, basically since the beginning, like from the time the white paper was announced. I've been loving the thing. Back in 2008, I immediately saw a value for publishers and tech companies and independent workers, people all over the world who needed a reliable means to send and receive information and to send and receive value for that information and be able to store that information in a reliable way and retrieve it whenever necessary, and to do it in a pseudonymous way, if not an anonymous way, which, by the way, Bitcoin can actually be anonymous. When people say it is only pseudonymous, that's just because they usually don't understand how to actually use it properly. But if you actually know how to use it properly, you'll comprehend that you can actually be anonymous. For example, I present to you Satoshi Nakamoto. Who is Satoshi? Does anybody know? Does anyone know? Right? The answer is no. No one actually knows, or no one who has come forward can actually say definitively who it is. So no one has publicly declared who Satoshi is, and Satoshi is the creator of Bitcoin. Bitcoin could be anyone. It could be any group of people. It could be anything. Maybe it was an AI from the future. Like, haha, I say jokingly, but kind of half jokingly, because you don't know that it's not. Probably it wasn't, but you don't know that for sure, right? Because Satoshi was smart enough to remain anonymous. Okay? And yes, there are some things in Bitcoin that you can use to determine who someone is if that person does certain things and kills their own anonymity. Absolutely. Then again, if you follow the path that Satoshi did, you can be anonymous on Bitcoin. Like, you don't actually have to let anyone know anything about your involvement with it ever, and then how would they actually know? You can just acquire through any number of ways that do not involve using your credit card or other information about you, and you can essentially get into Bitcoin without actually giving up your information, which means you can remain anonymous. Again, it's not for everyone to do, but it is entirely possible. So if you ever doubt that Bitcoin can be anonymous, just remind yourself, no one knows who invented it. If that isn't proof positive to you that you can remain anonymous with it for a very long time, I don't know what to tell you. Sure, you have. You're hilarious. Okay, guys, I figured out how to. Okay, you guys are really. Did I stumble into some unfortunate viewer feed of idiots? Because that's what it seems like YouTube is sending me. Please bring your intelligent questions. I love those. Sometimes you guys bring me amazing questions. Sometimes you do what you're doing now. I guess it all depends on who YouTube has decided to put into my feed, or to feed my video to, rather. But it should be a surprise to no one, because we all know that when it comes to talking about Bitcoin, we know who are usually the most interested people in this type of thing at certain times of day and certain times of week. We know who the typical demographics are that will show up to this kind of live feed video. I get it. But YouTube, you could do better. Right? You could show this to people who are actually interested in learning a thing or two about Bitcoin and all, but that's fine. This video will remain on the YouTubes for other people to enjoy and learn from, hopefully. So now that we've established that Bitcoin will probably survive the next at least 15 years, and we will get to at least 99% of all the Bitcoin being mined. And we already have more than 90%, really 95% of all the Bitcoin owned by people who have 100 or more Bitcoins. Right? What it means is that the rest of the world is basically competing for wresting some control over the remaining 5% of all the Bitcoin. That's what it means. And if you think that the rest of the world is going to get to keep those 5%, you're having a laugh. You're laughing at yourself. You're taking the piss out of yourself. Because there's no way that the big whales who are holding the biggest amounts of Bitcoin are going to let you come in and take away their coins. And they want the coins you have too. They're not happy having just 95%. They want all of it. Like, they literally don't want you to have any of it. Now, of course, the problem with that is that they would ever get all of it. Well, then arguably the average person would have no use for it. And it would easily just go the way of the dodo because nobody would see any value in it. If literally the only people who own any of it are the wealthiest people on earth, and there was no way for any normal person to actually acquire any meaningful amount that could change their life, etc. And that's what other coins and projects exist for, like Litecoin, which literally has all the same technology as Bitcoin and just has 4 times as many coins. That's really the only difference, and therefore it produces block rewards at a rate that is 4 times higher than Bitcoin. Right? That's all it means. That's the only difference. That's why people call it silver to Bitcoin's gold. There is no meaningful substantive difference in how Litecoin works versus how Bitcoin works. The only meaningful difference is in the number of coins, right? Therefore, the block rewards is just 4x, and the number of nodes currently running Litecoin, which is lower than the number of nodes running Bitcoin, but still has a pretty decent number of nodes overall. Since, any miner in the crypto space is mining Bitcoin, certainly is thinking about, or has thought about, or has previously mined Litecoin, right? And considering you can get about 1,000 Litecoins for every Bitcoin, and there's only 4 times as many Litecoins as there are Bitcoins in the max supply, there's kind of no reason not to mine Litecoin, right? Because you can easily mine more than 4 times as many Litecoins than you can Bitcoins, given the difference in the number of nodes mining Litecoin versus Bitcoin. So your chances of mining Litecoin are much higher than your chances of mining Bitcoin. And that means you can easily get more Litecoins than Bitcoins. And therefore, and since Litecoin has such a little value in people's perception compared to Bitcoin, even though it has the exact same technology and everything, and it's just a matter of time until people wake up and realize, wait a minute, there's practically no Bitcoin left, and there's all this Litecoin available, and it's still held by retail holders. Not that that matters to you individually, but it is a fact. It is held by retail holders, the majority of it, just like Cardano. You may as well have as much Litecoin as possible, because inevitably, and unless something horribly wrong happens, it is likely that Litecoin will actually see a significant increase in value, bringing it much closer to parity with Bitcoin. Now, it may never reach parity with Bitcoin. It may never reach, and what would parity with Bitcoin mean? It would mean that Litecoin would be worth a quarter of a Bitcoin, right? Because then for every one Bitcoin, you'd have 4 Litecoins, and that would make sense on numerical scale if you were just looking at it in that sense. Divide by 4, you get the same number. Right? So that's parity, 4 to 1 or 1 to 4. But it doesn't have to have that parity to still give Litecoin a massive increase in revenues or returns rather, right? And to give a massive boost in profits to Litecoin holders, who then obviously would sell some for a massive profit. So Bitcoin itself, while it is essentially an endangered species in terms of availability, and I've been telling you guys it is an endangered species in terms of availability. In other words, I've been saying to you the supply shock is real and it's coming, and it is here already. I've been telling you that for a long time since it happened. Right? The supply shock is real. It is happening. We're seeing it every day. You're seeing big buyers continue to buy more. Right? MicroStrategy has almost 650,000 Bitcoin. They literally have like 649,000 and change Bitcoins. BlackRock has well over 700,000. I think probably almost 800,000 now. Who knows what their next quarterly report will show. I'm sure they're continuing to buy despite whatever sell-offs they've had or they've had from investors, etc. They continue to hold. Like, you got to remember, when they buy an asset by demand from like an ETF purchase, they don't just buy your Bitcoin and when you cash out they sell that Bitcoin. No. When they buy an asset because of a demand increase, if you cash out because you want profit or you want to sell because you're panicking or something, they give you your money in US dollars. They don't give you Bitcoins back, right? They give you your money in US dollars, and that means they keep the Bitcoin. They just write off that loss, if you will, of US dollars, which they've already factored in when they bought it. They don't care if it costs them. So let's say they bought the Bitcoin at $100,000, okay, for you, because you ordered a Bitcoin at $100,000. So they went and bought a Bitcoin, and now they've added a Bitcoin to their stack. And then you sell it at 110,000, 120,000, and you manage to sell near the high. Okay, so they give you $120,000. So they've lost, right? Basically, they spent $220,000. They spent $100,000 to buy the coin, and they paid you $120,000 when you sold it, right? They're not just selling that Bitcoin to lose only $20,000. No. They're keeping that Bitcoin because they think Bitcoin is going to a lot higher than $220,000 in value over time. Like, they don't care if they don't make that money back now or next month or next quarter or next year. They really don't. As a company, right, running one of the biggest ETFs, they care about the long-term prospects of this, which means 5 years minimum, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. That's what they're looking at. So if you think you're able to figure out exactly what they're going to do, oh no, they're going to sell the Bitcoin that I sold. No, they're not selling the Bitcoin that you sold. The Bitcoin worth of ETF that you sold, because you didn't actually sell a Bitcoin. You sold them back a piece of paper or a digital document that says, please sell this Bitcoin. And they wrote you back saying, okay, here's the money for the Bitcoin that you bought, the Bitcoin ETF you bought. We still hold that Bitcoin. They don't even have to tell you that, right? But they still hold that Bitcoin. If they didn't still hold that Bitcoin, then explain how their numbers continue to rise even when people are selling some of them off, right? It's literally because they keep buying despite any sell-offs, and they keep holding despite any sell-offs, because they know the long-term value of this thing in people's minds is going to be perceived to be increasing over time. Hello. Hi. Hello. You want to say hi? You can say hi. All right. Scaredy dog. Shalom. So Bitcoin very likely to keep surviving and keep growing in value. When is going to hit $1 million? If that's what your concern is, look, man, it might happen. It might not. My estimation is it probably will happen at some point, but I ain't waiting up nights, right? Just know that if you've invested in something that literally all of the wealthiest people and organizations and governments in the world have invested in, you've probably done something smart. Right? There's literally a U.S. national reserve of this stuff being built, right? Just like there is for oil, just like there is for cheese, just like there are for many other things that the U.S. keeps national reserves for in case of emergency. Oh, more water in the canal. Let's look at the water in the canal. This is a rain canal that only appears in the winter. It only started appearing last week. And it is very slowly starting to get filled up a little bit for this season of the rain. Um, so yeah, so like if you have invested in this thing that literally the U.S. government has invested in, that literally the Federal Reserve Chairman has compared in this past week to gold. He said literally Bitcoin is digital gold. That's the first time a Fed chairman has ever said something like that. May not seem significant to you, but it is a big deal. It's about as big of a deal. It basically enshrines the value of what Trump did last summer when he made the U.S. have, by executive order, a Bitcoin national reserve and a national digital reserve of other digital assets, including crypto and AI stuff, right? Including specifically for cryptos and some AI stuff. Now, interestingly, as I pointed out when that happened, Litecoin was not included on that list of digital assets. What was included? Solana, Cardano, XRP, and Ethereum. Fine choices, and it gives you a top 5, and there you go. You include Bitcoin in the separate reserve for Bitcoin. But don't be surprised if Litecoin is one of the next, if not the next on the list. Why? Because of all the reasons I just told you. Right? When will that happen? It'll probably happen when you're least looking. It'll probably happen when you're least expecting it to. It'll just suddenly happen. And then one day you'll turn on the telly or the internet or whatever you watch information on, and you'll notice somewhere that Litecoin's been made a national asset, and you'll be like, "Damn, I should have listened to Yasha. He knows what he's talking about." Yeah, probably true. Not always about everything, that's for sure. But when it comes to this stuff, I may know a thing or two because I've been at it for a very, very, very long time. I've been into crypto for far longer than Bitcoin's been around, meaning cryptography and even cryptocurrencies. There were previous versions of cryptocurrencies, they just weren't globally scalable. Right? If you don't know about the Leaf system, with all these different trees, etc. If you don't know about all that, I highly recommend you go and look into that. You'll find American Airlines rather, in the 80s using a blockchain of sorts, right? One of the primitive prototype blockchain concepts. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't scalable, but it was a very revolutionary concept, especially for something as mundane as a customer loyalty rewards program. And it was in fact used for that. So I highly recommend you go look there and you have a gander into seeing what it is that brought about this revolution, if you're interested in that kind of thing. You may not be. It may be that for you, this is all just boring and you just want to know what the price is going to be tomorrow. Well, in that case, come check out the Alpha Trading community that I helped co-found. Right? There are about 6 of us. There are 6 of us who co-founded it. And it is a very powerful community in the sense that our tools and methods are incredibly reliable, very powerful, because they give you precise leading information. Our calculators are the best there are because they give you very precise leading information about very important mathematics that are actually the maths that are used by the HFT firms and the quant shops that actually run anywhere from 70 to 90% of all trades on all time frames for any asset class in any market. Right? They actually run the majority of the trades, which means they control the markets. They run millions of trades per second on each of their giant bots or each of their giant computer systems. They have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people all over the world managing these things in about 20 to 30 different significant companies. There's more, there's like up to 100 or so. They're kind of in the game at a relatively high level, but 20 to 30 of them really, are the lion's share. And it's even fewer than that if you want to get really technical about who actually owns this business. It's a very small number of companies and a really tiny number of people compared to the overall number of people on the planet, for instance, right? So I highly recommend you come and learn how to trade what we call the VEPS, which stands for volatility, entropy, probabilities, and statistics. You can learn for free, by the way. We give away our tools for learning because they're really powerful. We actually develop those tools for ourselves and use them for ourselves. And before we had our advanced tools, like our more advanced tools, right? We used only the tools that we currently give away for free, right? When we had only our basic tools, if you were joining our server at that time, you would also have received them for free just like you do now, because we literally gave away all those tools for free to people. But now, since shortly after that initial first month or two, our developers have been blasting out indicators every year, and we've published more than 40 indicators. We've created more than 40 indicators. It's kind of crazy. It's not crazy in the sense of it's too much. No, it's not too much. It's just crazy how incredibly productive our indicator makers have been. So you can come and check out our free tools, learn how to trade volatility, probabilities, and statistics for free. Give you the free tools and give you the free education. The Discord is full of educational info that you can learn from. And on top of that, if you want to learn how to trade faster, meaning how to get up to speed faster and actually be a successful, profitable trader, you can sign up to our private tutoring, which happens to be on the holiday sale right now. And yesterday was Black Friday, and Monday's Cyber Monday, but we've had our deals in place for a little while, and they're still in place until the end of the year. And if you sign up right now to the private tutoring, you don't just get a bunch of one-on-one, you don't just get videos, first of all, which is, go watch this. No, you actually get one-on-one sessions with real tutors, either me or Bilbo, one of the other co-founders. And we don't license out the right to teach our stuff. If you're learning from Alpha Trading, you're actually learning from one of the co-founders. That's it. That's why we have very limited availability for that, but it is available for those who are serious. You can come in and enter and do that, and we will literally handhold you through the process of learning how to trade. And on top of that, you get our tools, like our premium tools, for an entire year. Plus, you get to DM us whenever you need to, etc. And there's a crazy discount on that. Also, if you don't want the tutoring, but you just want the Pro Tools, and again, the offer is available till the end of the year, right? If you don't want to get the tutoring, you just want the Pro Tools, you can do that too. And you save also a crazy amount. It's like 30% or something, which puts the price at less than $1,000. It's like, I think it's like right around $900, maybe a few dollars more, which is like less than the price of a tank of gas, right, every day, which you certainly spend going to your job and back every day, etc. Right, just as examples, or less than an average coffee at Starbucks for 5 months. So you can come and get that. And if you're one of the very first 50 people to do that between now and the end of the year, you actually get to pick 3 of the indicators from our Pro Pack, right, our premium indicators, and you get to keep them for life, which is really powerful. Because if you have the free tools, plus even 3 of our premium indicators, if you know which ones to pick, and you have the whole year to choose, you don't have to like choose when you sign up. No, you got literally the entire year to choose which ones you want for free. For life, well, you can build quite a powerful tool set, even if you don't intend to be a professional trader or a full-time trader for more than a year or 2 or 3, right? You still get to keep them for life. So I highly recommend you look into that, because you'll get incredibly powerful tools that you get to keep for life, the free ones and the premium ones. Again, you got to be one of the first 50 people to do that. So go and do that before the deal expires. Don't miss out on it. I really, really recommend you don't miss out on it. It's not worth missing out. There's too much value in this. You're going to kick yourself come January if you didn't get this deal, because this deal will not be available in January. And I'd hate to see you lose that opportunity if you come to me on January 1st and you're like, hey, can I get the tools? And I'll tell you no. And you'll say, why? And I'll say, because it wasn't available beyond the new year, which is why I've been telling you that every day from the time that we first announced the deal would go on offer. So do yourself a favor and get yourself that subscription, is what I have to say about that. Anyway, and the URL for that is alphatradinghq.com/Discord. That'll take you right to our Discord. Hello, Ben. How are you? My ninja. Okay. Where am I? I'm in Israel. Shalom Asisi Binik. Okay. That's where I am. I'm in Israel. Happy whatever. Indeed, Marcel. Happy whatever. All right, folks. That's going to do for now. I will see you on the flip side. Hope you've all learned something. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And hit that notification bell so that you don't miss the next updates. Appreciate it very much. Till the next one. Shalom. Goodbye. Peace. Happy trading.